Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Men's ADHD Support Group. I am really, really excited for tonight's discussion. Tonight, we have my friend Kyrus Westcott, also known simply as Kai, is the creator of Vibe with Kai, a digital platform dedicated to making conversations about ADHD, introversion, and mental health more approachable through honesty and humor. With close to 2 million followers across social media, Kai combines lived experience with storytelling to help adults better understand their minds and embrace who they are. He has spoken at the White House Creator Economy Summit. That's amazing. The Shimmer ADHD Growth Summit, and was recognized as one of JCI USA's 10 outstanding young Americans. His work focuses on practical tools, compassionate insight, and real talk for navigating ADHD and mental health as an adult. Learn more at thevibewithkai.com or follow him on any social media platform at The Vibe with Kai. Kai, welcome to the show.
Right on. Thank you so much for having me. That was a fantastic introduction. Very
Yeah. Shout out to you and your team for having that written out for me and not leaning on my memory. And, we obviously had the pleasure of chatting with you on your podcast. And I also got to yap with you on the Attitude Magazine panel. And that was a ton of fun. And I think we even bumped into each other at a movie.
did. We physically bumped into each other in New York City at a movie premiere.
Yeah, I took a fun selfie with the Instagram available and all that. It was crazy. And super excited to get into tonight's subject of ethical non-monogamy. And we're getting into this a little bit of a sex chat too, which is definitely a fascinating territory to explore. And, one of the things that I find extremely interesting is with the subject of ethical non-monogamy, promoting this has taught me so much. I have never realized how, and I'm sure we're gonna get into this tonight when we talk about like the Q&A and whatnot, but how unnecessarily controversial
Yes.
this subject could be and how misunderstood it can be.
Yes.
And I'm sure you're gonna dive into that. I'm sure the team's gonna have questions about that. But I'm really, really fascinated to hear your approach with this and take on the whole subject. And from there, I could just pass it on to you to talk to us, just to kick off the discussion on what ethical non-monogamy is. And
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's viewed as taboo. And so people are afraid to talk about it, let alone live it, obviously. But like that's one of the main reasons why I love talking about this subject because I think that there are just so many misconceptions surrounding it. A lot of people are like, "Oh, this is just another way to cheat on your partner." And it's just not the case. And I want to kind of steer us away from that kind of mindset because it's just not what it is at all. So let's dive into it. Thank you, everybody, for letting me be a part of your evening today. This is one of those things where I always want to say from the top, like, this topic, it's a safe topic. Like, I come into these conversations and I always say to people, you're not expected to know everything. You're not expected to agree even with everything. You're not expected to have your mind made up about anything. This whole thing today is about just being curious, and it's okay if you're feeling anxious. It's okay if you're feeling excited about it. It's okay if you're feeling confused. All of those feelings are valid here, and all of that belongs here. So I just want to make sure that however you're feeling right now, heading into this conversation, it is a valid way to feel. Ethical non monogamy is new for a lot of people. It's not new in life, but it's new for a lot of people. For some people, it's new. For others, maybe you read a little bit about it or you heard about it from a friend. Either way, today's session is all about clarity, right? That's what it's about. This session is about clarity. It's about understanding. It's about understanding your options. And hopefully, you're here to learn. You're not here to commit. You're not here to perform. You're not here to prove anything. You get to just take what fits for your life and then leave the rest. That's the beauty of this subject matter. So let's dive into this. First of all, that was a great introduction, but let me dive a little deeper into like who I am and why this specific topic hits home for me. I'm going to start with the ADHD side. I didn't grow up knowing I had ADHD. I was diagnosed in my mid 30s. Before that, my entire relationship history felt like this series of moments that made absolutely no sense, right? I kept asking myself why things, why some things felt harder than they should, why small misunderstandings hit my nervous system all the time, why I would often shut down sometimes during conflict, why I forgot agreements even when I cared about the person. I carried so much shame around those patterns in my life because I thought that meant that I was failing at something that everyone else understood naturally. After my diagnosis, a lot of those patterns kind of started to click into place for me. I felt like someone handed me like a pair of glasses. I could look back at my old relationships and see exactly where my brain was overwhelmed. I could see where the emotional intensity took over. I could see the moments where I tried to be the version of myself I thought I was supposed to be instead of the version of myself that I actually was. I say that because I've also lived in polyamorous relationships in the past. I'm not in one right now at the moment. It's just me and my 2 cats, but but I have learned from real experience, right? And some of the lessons came from these beautiful moments where communication felt strong and it felt honest. And some of the lessons not only came from that, but it also came from the hard moments where my ADHD symptoms crashed into the quote structure and everything got overwhelming. And that relationship taught me a lot about how much clarity matters, how much direct communication matters, how much honesty with yourself matters, how much naming your needs matters. I care about this topic because men with ADHD often move through relationships with confusion that not a lot of people talk about. A lot of times, men, we look calm or tough from the outside, but on the inside, we're still trying to sort through this fear of rejection, this time blindness, this emotional intensity, this struggle that we have with things like our working memory. A lot of us, we care deeply, but the way that our brain processes relationships is different. And that difference doesn't make us broken. That difference just needs understanding and structure and not shame. So, as I'm talking to you today, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and you don't have to answer it right away. You may not have the answer, but it's just something I want you to think about. And the first question I'm going to ask is it probably fits more of you than you think, right? I want you to just take a moment and think to yourself if you've ever felt confused by your own reactions in a relationship. Lord knows I've been there, right? And I'm sure a lot of you are probably thinking yes, that there's been times that you've been so incredibly confused, right? That right there is proof that nothing about you is strange or isolated. That confusion is shared by so many men with ADHD. And so I wanted to ask that because I just want you to know that you're in good company tonight. So before we dive into anything deeper, I want to set the frame for tonight. And this part matters because the last thing I want is for anybody that's watching this to feel pressured or pushed in any direction. You are not expected to practice ethical non-monogamy after this session, right? This is not a recruitment section. This is not persuasion. This is not a sales pitch for any kind of relationship style. It's not about that, right? Tonight is all about clarity. It's not about conversion. My job today is to give you information and tools and language and insight so that you feel more grounded in your understanding of relationships, no matter what structure you live in. Every relationship cycle is respected here, right? Monogamy is respected. Open relationships are respected. Poly relationships are respected. Curiosity is respected. Uncertainty is respected. You get to be exactly who you are without judgment, no matter where you are when it comes to relationships. Everything that I talk about today is educational. It's not prescriptive. Nothing here tells you what you should do. Again, I just want to talk about options. I want to give you awareness. I want to give you a better understanding of why your brain responds the way that it does in relationships. You decide what fits your life. You decide what aligns with your values. You decide what stays and what goes. So I invite you to stay open, to stay curious. And if a topic makes you tense today, breathe and stay with it. If something feels new, give yourself permission to explore it without commitment. And if something does not fit your identity or values, that's okay. Let it pass. You get to walk through this space with your shoulders relaxed and your guard down. Because again, tonight is about understanding and connection, not about pressure or performance. I put a lot of emphasis on this because, again, as men, we sometimes just have this expectation of people put on us sometimes of who we should be, what we should be, and why and how. And so we have these walls up as men. So that's why you're going to hear me validate your feelings a lot today, because that's really important. All right. So let me share my screen here. Oh, yeah. There you go. I think you can see my screen. All right. So let's talk about what we're going to go through today. Right. This is our roadmap right here. I want you to know exactly where we're headed and why each of these sections matter. We're going to start with with what ethical non-monogamy is, what it means. We're going to clear up the basics so nobody feels lost or left behind. You're going to learn some of the core principles and different structures that people use. And then from there, we'll talk about why neurodivergent men look at this topic with a different lens. ADHD shapes relationships in ways that are rarely explained. So we're gonna name some of those patterns today. And after that, we're gonna talk about emotions, RSD, right? Jealousy, fear, insecurity, intensity. This is a part that many men carry in silence because it feels embarrassing or confusing. And you're gonna hear language for those reactions that will hopefully help you feel a little less overwhelmed. From there, we're going to move on to communication tools, right? Real tools, no fluffy ideas or anything like that. Just systems that help your brain stay grounded. Scripts that help you speak clearly and structure that helps you show up the way that you want to show up. And at the end, we're going to talk about new relationship energy, which is basically like a high dopamine whirlwind that hits hard for people with ADHD. And you're going to learn how to notice it and manage it without hurting existing relationships, right? And finally, we're going to end with next steps. Nothing pressured, nothing heavy. You're just going to leave with clarity, practical direction. What does it mean? What does ethical non-monogamy mean? Ethical non-monogamy is one of those topics like I feel like people hear about, but the definition often gets twisted by jokes and stereotypes and fear-based stories. So before we go anywhere else, I want to lay the foundation in a very clear way. You see 4 words on this slide: honesty, consent, communication, responsibility. These are the 4 pillars that make ethical non-monogamy healthy and respectful. If one of these 4 breaks, the entire structure breaks. If these 4 stay strong, then the structure stays grounded. So let's walk through them one at a time. Let's start with honesty. Honesty means everyone knows what is happening. Nobody is in the dark. Nobody's guessing. Nobody is being misled. There are no secret conversations or hidden side situations, right? Honesty is the difference between ethical non-monogamy and cheating. I'm going to say that louder for the people in the back because that's important. Honesty is the difference between ethical non-monogamy and cheating. One involves clarity. The other involves deception. They are not the same thing. After honesty, we have consent. Consent means every person involved agrees to the structure from a place of comfort and choice, not fear, not pressure, not guilt, not, oh, I guess I need to say yes to keep the relationship kind of energy. Like, no, absolutely not. Real consent feels steady. Real consent feels voluntary. Real consent feels like people understand the structure and choose it with a clear mind. After consent, we have communication. Communication means people talk through expectations, they talk through boundaries, they talk through feelings, and they update each other. Not perfect communication, because nobody has that in any type of relationship, right? This is intentional communication, direct communication, honest communication before something happens, communication during the experience, communication after the experience, communication that honors everyone's emotional reality. And then finally, you have responsibility. Responsibility means you follow through on the agreements you create. You take ownership of your emotional reactions. You stay aware of the impact that your choices have on partners. You do not rely on others to manage your feelings. You do your part. Responsibility keeps the structure stable during some of the hardest moments. Now, when these four pieces work together, ethical non-monogamy becomes a clear, steady system instead of confusing or a chaotic one. These four pieces are the reason that many people feel grounded in ethical non-monogamy than in traditional relationships. There's structure, there's expectations, there's a shared understanding, there's less guesswork. So as we move through this session, I want you to keep these four words close. Write them down if you can. Honesty, consent, communication, responsibility. Everything else grows from these pillars. Without them, the structure collapses, and with them, you have clarity, stability, and respect. What I find really funny is that we're having this conversation about honesty, consent, communication, and responsibility when it comes to ethical non-monogamy, but all of this applies to monogamous relationships too. They're not as far apart as people may realize, because there isn't a single damn thing that I said in the last 5 minutes that can't be applied to, quote, normal relationships, to, quote, traditional relationships. All of it applies. But of course, today, we're talking about ethical non-monogamy. You don't want me to go on a rant about traditional relationships. That's for another, that's for another time. Let's move on to structure here. There are a lot of different structures that you might see under the ethical non-monogamy umbrella, right? There's so many. The four that you see on the screen are ones that I think people run into the most, right? They look similar on the surface, but they describe very, very different experiences. So I made the slide to keep it as simple as possible, and I'm going to walk through them in plain language here. Start with polyamory. Polyamory refers to having more than one romantic relationship with openness, depth, and intention. Emotional connection is central here. People build long-term bonds, they make plans and form real partnerships. Open relationships usually start with a main couple who stay committed to each other while allowing sexual connections outside of the relationship. There's often less focus on romance outside of the main partnership and more focus on exploring a physical connection. Next, you have swinging. Swinging is usually focused on shared experiences as a couple with other couples or individuals. It is more of a social, it's more of like a social experiment, as more of a social experience, I should say, and a sexual experience rather than a romantic one. I want you to think of it as a recreational activity couples do, kind of like pickleball, right? It's a little bit different. So it's a little bit like a recreational activity that couples will do together. And then lastly, you have a relationship anarchy. A relationship anarchy removes the hierarchy from relationships entirely. No labels, no assumptions, no built-in expectations. Just every connection is shaped uniquely by the people involved. People design each relationship on its own terms rather than following a predefined path. So these are the big four, right? Not every relationship fits neatly into these categories, but these help us kind of speak the same language tonight. Now, I want to gauge the room for a second, right? I'm curious as you're looking at these, if there's any of them that you may have heard of before, some that you may be new to you, whatever it may be. I just want to take a moment and think about what you do know about each of these. I want you to do that. Let's go into some neurodivergent traits here, right? When it comes to ethical non-monogamy, because I think this is important. I want to take a moment and talk about how this comes into play for neurodivergent men, right? There's a lot of men, there's a lot of neurodivergent men that look at ethical non-monogamy through a different lens, right? This is something people rarely explain. And once you hear it, the pieces kind of start lining up in a way that feels a little steady. The first piece is autonomy, right? People with ADHD tend to value freedom in a deep way, not freedom from commitment, right? Freedom from unspoken rules, rigid expectations, right? Freedom from structure, right? Structures that feel a little outdated and forced, right? Ethical non-monogamy appeals to so many different neurodivergent people because it gives space for individuality. You get to design connection instead of inheriting it. So you have autonomy. The second piece is a lot of neurodivergent people are often questioning norms, right? Many of us grew up wondering why certain social rules existed in the first place. We were kids asking why things needed to be done in a certain way. That trait, it doesn't disappear from adulthood. Ethical non-monogamy, it fits naturally into a mindset, whether you prefer to think of yourself rather than accept something. The third piece is preference for clarity, right? ADHD brains, we don't like guesswork, right? So when expectations feel vague, we spiral. When communication is unclear, we fill blanks with fear. Ethical non-monogamy often involves more honest and explicit communication than traditional relationships, which brings comfort for people who want directness over assumptions, right? So first we had autonomy, next we have questioning norms, third piece we had clarity, and then fourth piece is masking relief. A lot of people spent years pretending to be more organized, right? More organized, more calm, more social, or more emotionally steady than we felt on the inside. And so masking drains you. Ethical non-monogamy communities tend to be a little bit more accepting of neurodivergent traits, right? So you don't have to pretend, you don't have to perform, you don't have to hide the way that your brain works. That relief is powerful. So these traits don't mean that every neurodivergent person wants ethical non-monogamy. They just simply explain why the structure feels natural for some. It aligns with values and needs that already exist within the neurodivergent experience, right? Okay. Let's talk about my personal connection to this because I want to share a little bit more about my own experience here because I think that personal context kind of helps us all feel a little bit makes us all feel a little bit more real than theoretical, right? There were a lot of years where masking drained me without realizing how much energy it cost, right? I tried to look calm when my brain felt scattered. I tried to look confident when I felt overwhelmed. I tried to look easygoing during moments where emotions were running twice as fast as the conversation. And that kind of masking, it eats away at you, right? You start feeling like the real version of yourself is too much or too confusing for people to handle. What surprised me the most when I stepped into ethical non monogamy was the relief that I felt when people allowed space for my actual energy and pace. I didn't have to hide the speed of my brain. I didn't have to pretend that I processed emotions slowly or neatly. The people that I dated were open to honest conversations about ADHD and how it shaped my reactions. And that space made a difference in how I felt and how safe that I felt in these relationships. The structure of ethical non-monogamy also changed communication for me. The expectation for clear discussion made things easier. Having agreements even written down made things easier. Talking openly about schedules and feelings and boundaries, that made things easier. I didn't have to read between the lines. I didn't have to guess. The structure helped me show up with more honesty and more consistency. And at the same time, ADHD added both beauty and difficulty to that experience, right? My curiosity, my enthusiasm, my ability to connect deeply, it helped me build these really meaningful relationships. Those were the most beautiful parts. The challenging parts came from the emotional intensity and things like time blindness, right? Moments where my focus would shift very quickly, moments where my working memory would slip, moments where I reacted strongly even when I didn't want to. So for me, ethical non-monogamy was not perfect and it's not flawless. It was a space where my traits showed up clearly. Some moments taught me new strengths. Some moments taught me where I needed support. But either way, it gave me a better understanding of myself and the way that I move through connection. If any of that part sounds familiar, again, you're in the right room today. So again, I want to bring your thoughts into the room here, right? And I want to understand you a little bit more, right? I want you to think about your past relationships for a moment. Not to judge yourself, not to beat yourself up, only to notice what felt harder than people around you seem to experience. I'm going to ask you a question here. When you think about past relationships, which part felt hardest to manage with ADHD? Was it the communication? Was it jealousy? Was it follow through? Was it time management? Was it emotional intensity? Was it all of the above? Was it something completely different? I want you to just take a moment and think that through. I want to repeat that just in case you need it. When you think about your past relationships, which part felt hardest to manage with ADHD? Communication, jealousy, follow through, time management, emotional intensity, all the above, or something else. Now, if you said communication, that comes up for a lot of men with ADHD. We lose the thread. We forget important details. We react before we want to. We freeze during conflict. Again, none of that means that you're broken. It just means that your brain processes information a different way. If you said jealousy or emotional intensity, right? Jealousy and emotional intensity are very common because our nervous system reacts fast, faster than the situation sometimes, faster than we want, faster than our partner can understand. And that intensity does not mean something is wrong with you. It means that your emotional system fires quickly and it fires strongly. If you said time management is tough because our internal clock runs a different way. Those of us with ADHD, we live in the ADHD time zone, right? We lose track of minutes, we lose track of hours. We think we have more time than we do, right? In relationships, that leads to missed plans. That means to showing up late to a date. That leads to fear of what people think that we or think that we don't care, right? If you said follow through becomes a challenge when the excitement fades or your executive functioning hits a wall. You care deeply, you do, but tasks fall apart once the dopamine drops. And that creates misunderstandings that hurt on both sides. Now, if you said all of the above, hmm, welcome to the world of ADHD. That is very honest and very normal. And if you said something else, right, make sure you name that experience, right? It doesn't have to fit neatly on this list, but name it. And understand that ADHD shapes relationships in so many ways. No matter what you name it, it matters, even if it looks a little bit different than somebody else. Everything that you're thinking in this moment, it makes sense. None of it makes you strange or difficult, right? These patterns show up in many men with ADHD. And that's why we're talking about ethical non-monogamy tonight, not because it's a solution, but because it gives us a way to understand our needs, our reactions, and our relationship patterns with a little bit more clarity and a little less shame. I just want to read some of the comments that we're getting right now, right? I'm here for the cats. Me too. Every day. Yes. I'm leaving the sex talk in as an outtake, as you should, Shane. Absolutely. You better be in there. Communication, need for difference in intimacy, sex, emotional intensity. Yes. When the tasks fall apart, it leaves my true intention in a misunderstood place. Seems like I don't care, but I do. Absolutely. Absolutely. 125 million% there. So let's talk about something that many men with ADHD experience but rarely name, and that's RSD, also known as rejection sensitive dysphoria. This is one of the, I think, misunderstood parts of ADHD, and it has a huge impact on how we show up in relationships, right? RSD is an intense emotional reaction to a real or perceived rejection, right? The key word here is perceived, right? Your brain sees a small change in tone, a delayed text, a pause in conversation, or a partner sounding tired, and it feels like a threat. The reaction inside your chest hits fast. It feels sharp, it feels sudden, and it feels bigger than the situation. When you live with RSD, rejection does not feel like disappointment, it feels like danger. Your nervous system fires before your logic has a chance to catch up. You might pull back, you might shut down, you might get defensive, you might get loud, you might over explain, you might apologize for things that did not happen. You panic, you sometimes might even panic, right? When you're trying to like look calm on the outside, right? None of those reactions come from weakness. They come from a sensitive emotional system that fires at full volume. RSD makes small moments feel personal, even when nobody meant harm, and it makes you question your place in somebody's life. It makes you doubt your worth. It makes harmless comments feel like clues that something is wrong. RSD also affects secure moments, right? A partner showing affection feels amazing, but the moment that you sense distance, your brain jumps to the worst case scenario. So when we talk about ethical non-monogamy, we cannot ignore RSD. Multiple relationships bring more moments where misunderstanding or insecurity might happen. That means that your emotional system gets more chances to fire. That's why awareness matters. You're not overreacting. Your brain, again, is reacting very quickly and very deeply. So once you understand RSD, the emotional spikes start to make a little bit more sense. And you can slow them down. You can start to name what is happening, and you can communicate from a grounded place instead of communicating from a place of panic. This part of the session is not about understanding, or it is about understanding, I should say, right? It's not about judgment. It's not about shame. It's about understanding. Another thing I want to highlight here is jealousy when we have this conversation, right? Jealousy is one of the most common emotions that people bring to any relationship. It shows up in monogamous relationships. It shows up in ethical non-monogamy. It shows up even when everything is going well. Jealousy does not mean something is wrong with you. It just means something inside you wants safety and connection. So on this slide right here, you see 4 parts of jealousy that come up often for men with ADHD. The first one is fear of loss. When someone means something to you, the thought of losing them hits your nervous system very fast. You feel that rush in your stomach, the tension in your chest, the noise in your mind. And that fear does not always match the situation, and the reaction feels real. The second part is the fear of being replaced. ADHD can make comparison feel very intense because our emotional systems move very quickly. If your partner connects with someone else, your brain might jump to that fear, even if the connection is safe, healthy, and honest. The third part is fear of not being enough. ADHD often comes with years of internalized criticism, comes with years of missed tasks and miscues, moments where we felt misunderstood. All of that stuff adds up, right? So when someone else enters the picture, even in an ethical non-monogamy structure, old fears can resurface. It's not about the other person. It's about the story that your brain has learned to tell. And the fourth part is fear of reduced time. Things like time blindness and emotional intensity that can make attention from your partner truly feel like oxygen, right? When their time shifts, your nervous system feels the change before your logic can understand it. And that shift can feel like rejection, even when it's not. Jealousy is not a single emotion, it is a bundle of fears. Once you break it into pieces, it becomes easier to work with. You stop treating jealousy like a flaw. You start treating it like information. Your emotional system is signaling a need for reassurance, a need for clarity, a need for connection. When you slow jealousy down and name the pieces, you take the intensity out of it. You move from panic to awareness. And awareness is where you build healthy relationships. When we bring rejection sensitivity into ethical non-monogamy, the emotional landscape, it changes a little. Let's be real, right? RSD is already intense in one-on-one relationships. Add more connections, more conversations, more schedules, more moving parts, and your emotional system gets so many chances to fire. So here's what I want you to hear very clearly. That intensity is normal. You are not too much. You are not dramatic. You are not broken. Your brain is just reacting fast and strong, and ethical non-monogamy creates more moments where those reactions might be triggered. That does not mean that the story in your head is true. When RSD meets ethical non-monogamy, that spike might happen when your partner goes out on a date, or when they talk about somebody new, or when the plans shift, or when they come home excited. It might also happen sometimes when your own feelings shift towards a new partner. That part can surprise people. You can feel intense guilt for enjoying a connection and worry that you're hurting somebody that you really care about. All of that is part of the experience for so many neurodivergent people. Ethical non-monogamy, it does not ask you to remove jealousy or fear. It just asks you to communicate through it. I want to repeat that because that's super important. Ethical non-monogamy does not ask you to remove jealousy or fear. It asks you to communicate through it. It asks you to name your reactions instead of hiding them. It asks you to build agreements that help you stay grounded. It asks you to slow your thoughts down so they don't run ahead of reality. RSD becomes a lot easier to manage when you understand it. When you see the spike as a signal and not a verdict, it helps. When you talk about your needs before your emotions take over, when your partners understand how your brain works, when you have tools that help you regulate before you react. The goal is not to erase the intensity. You are an emotionally deep person, and that is part of what makes your relationships rich and meaningful, right? The goal is to make the intensity easier to navigate so it doesn't control you or shape the story of you. So now that we talked about what RSD and jealousy looks like, I want to give you some like practical tools here that'll help slow those reactions down. These are tools that I use myself, right? These are tools that so many people with ADHD use because they give you time to breathe, to think, to choose your response, all of that instead of reacting from fear. The first tool is to simply name the story. When your brain jumps to a fear-based conclusion, you say it out loud and you write it down. Not because the story is true, because the moment you name it, you separate yourself from it. The story stops running you and you start observing it. The second tool is asking for clarity. Many emotional spikes come from confusion. Instead of guessing or spiraling, you ask for information. You ask what someone meant. You ask how somebody feels. You ask what the plan is. Clarity reduces fear. The third tool is planning reassurance. People with RSD feel safer when reassurance is clear. They feel safer when reassurance is predictable, when it's agreed upon. You can build small reassurance practices into your relationship. I'm talking things like quick check-ins, short updates, or a text when plans shift, a moment of connection before a date. Consistent reassurance, it helps to build the trust. And the fourth tool is working with facts. Facts help slow emotion. Facts anchor you in reality. Facts interrupt the fear narrative. When you list the facts, you see the difference between what is happening and what your brain fears is happening. I want you to just take a moment and just let that sink in for a moment, right? Let that sink in. And I want you to think about a fear-based story that your brain tells you in relationships sometimes, right? Right. Just take a couple seconds to think about that. Right. Write down a fear that you've had in a relationship and then write down what the fact of it was, right? No emotion, no fear, only facts, the facts that you know for sure. This exercise it's not to fix jealousy or RSD, but it's to give you grounding. It's to help you see the difference between reaction and reality. And the more you practice this, the easier it becomes to slow the emotional spike and choose a healthier response. And again, this skill is powerful for any relationship style, not just ENM. It's especially helpful for an ethical non-monogamy, right? But it's good for every relationship. I'll give you a couple seconds just to think that through. Now, I want to talk about the ADHD side of this for a second, right? And I'm not talking about like the ADHD, cute, funny ADHD moments, right? I'm talking about the real relationships challenges that many of us deal with. The stuff that nobody explained to us growing up, the stuff that shaped our relationships even when we didn't know ADHD was a part of the picture. The first one I want to talk about is things like time blindness, right? This is not poor planning, this is not laziness, this is not disrespect. This is ADHD. Again, our internal clock does not track time the way that most people expect it to. So 5 minutes feels like 40 minutes. You think you have more time than you do. You miss the window without realizing it. In relationships, this shows up as running late, losing track of shared plans, underestimating how long something will take. That guilt, it's real. The frustrations on both sides is real, and it has nothing to do with how much you care. The second challenge is working memory gaps, right? Working memory is your brain's mental whiteboard, I call it, right? And people with ADHD, our mental whiteboard, it's a little smudged, to say the least, right? Information, it slips fast, right? Even things that you care about is going to slip out of your brain sometimes. And your partner might say something meaningful, and you lose the details, even though the emotion stayed with you. You might forget agreements unless they were written down somewhere. You might lose the thread midweek. You might remember the vibe, but not the specifics. That does not make you unreliable. It just means that your brain needs some external support. The third challenge is avoiding conflict. A lot of men with ADHD avoid hard conversations because conflict feels overwhelming to the nervous system. The minute that tension shows up, you shut down. You postpone the talk, you over-explain, you pretend everything is fine, not because you don't care, right? Because your system is trying to protect you from emotional overload. Meanwhile, your partner thinks that you're ignoring the issue. Two different experiences, same situation. A lot of these challenges are very real, right? They affect connection, right? They affect communication, they affect trust. They affect you emotionally because you do care. ADHD, it brings strengths, but it also brings a lot of friction points that need structure and support and awareness. And when we name these challenges openly, shame moves out of the way and understanding starts to move in. You're not alone in this experience, right? You are someone who, again, your brain is just working a little bit differently, and relationships get healthier when you know how to work with that difference instead of fighting against it. Now that we named some of the ADHD challenges, I do want to walk you through some tools that can actually help, right? Some tools that I try to use in my own relationships, and tools that can make that daily connection a little bit easier, right? And a little less stressful for everybody involved, including your partner. The first thing I like to do is, especially if you're in an ethical non-monogamous relationship, I'm talking daily, weekly check-ins, right? A simple scheduled conversation. It could be 10 or 15 minutes, same time each week, same time each day, where you talk about your feelings, your updates, your plans, any friction that you felt the last time that you talked, since the last time that you talked, right? And this kind of helps prevent tension from building, and it gives structure to the communication. In a past relationship, weekly check-ins and stuff, it saved us, my partner and I, during very busy months, right? We didn't wait for problems to explode. We talked through small things before they turned into big things. So things don't kind of get built up. The second tool is it's okay to write things down. I'm not talking like contractually, but it's good to write things down, like these written agreements. It's not to make things like formal, right? It's just, again, about clarity, right? You write things down that both you and your partner agree on, not as rules, but just more as like shared expectations. My partner and I, we wrote things down. We wrote down our expectations in, what do you call it, in a notes app on our phone, because we both had iPhones and you can share a notes app, right? So we simply wrote down our expectations in the notes app, and we shared that notes app with each other, right? And it made everything easier because I didn't have to rely on my working memory in moments where stress made recall next to impossible, right? So yeah, so things like those written agreements, shared notes, right? Like that kind of goes hand in hand with what I just said. Like sometimes people will do, I've seen people do Word documents, like a Google Doc, where you can do that as well. Again, it's not to make it sound like a contractual agreement. It's all about setting expectations and to keep everybody on the same page. The next tool is tone guidelines, right? This is a big one because people with ADHD often misread tone or react strongly to small shifts, right? So you and your partner can agree on how to speak during important conversations. Slow pace, direct language, short sentences, no sarcasm, no raised voices, and you create a tone that helps support calm instead of overwhelm. And the fifth thing that I recommend is to pause, right? Is to pause, and I call it pause and return. I call it the pause and return technique, right? When emotions spike, you pause. You say something like, I feel overwhelmed and will return to this conversation. Then you step away and you regulate. After you recover, you return. No disappearing, no stonewalling, just a clear pause and a clear return. I had to learn this the hard way after shutting down in several past conversations with a partner. But pausing helped me come back grounded instead of reactive. Another tool that you can use is, my therapist was talking to me about this. It's the repeat back the need technique. And I love this one, right? When your partner shares something important, you simply repeat the main point in your own words back to them, not in a robotic way, just in a grounded way, right? So if they're like, I really want you to go to sleep when I go to sleep, don't be like, you want me to go to sleep when I go to, like, no, like genuinely repeat it back in a grounded, genuine way. So if your partner says, I want more consistency or something like that, right? You can say back to them, okay, so the main thing that you need from me right now is consistency with plans, or the main thing that you want me to understand is that you feel disconnected when communication drops, right? This keeps the thread in your hands and it helps prevent misunderstandings. So things like that, they're simple, but they make a huge difference. They give your brain structure, they give your partner clarity, and they give your relationship steady foundation. When connection feels steady, everything else becomes easier to handle. Again, this is really important for things like ethical non-monogamy, right? Because you're already dealing with a lot on your own, and now you're throwing in some other things as well. You need to make sure that you have a steady foundation to stand on. I want to ask you another question, or I want another exercise that I want you to do, right? I want you to just think of just, and you can write it down if you want, you could type it in, whatever it may be. I just want you to think of one line that you struggle to say during conversations, right? A sentence that you want to express but feel nervous to say, right? Nothing, it doesn't have to be super personal, something pretty general. Like, so some examples are some things that I struggle with is saying things like, I need time, or I feel insecure, or, you know what, I forgot what we agreed on, you know? I suck at saying no. Absolutely. I do too. It's but oh my God. I suck at it very, very, very much. I'm with you there. Right. There's a lot of strong ones there. Right. Everything that you're thinking, that you're writing down, that you're sharing right now is it's real. Right. I feel nervous to say that a comment bothered me. It makes me feel overly sensitive when I am just human. Yes, absolutely. hmm these are the kind of things that many men with ADHD struggle to express because the moment feels too intense or it feels too vulnerable, right? So just to give some examples, and these are things that my therapist and I shared with me, because so if I like, for example, if I struggle with saying I need more time for something, right? I say things like, "Hey, I feel overwhelmed, and I need a moment to slow down so I can respond with clarity." Right? I do that because that, like, will remove the panic and it's gonna add intention, right? Or if you say things like, "I'm afraid that you'll be upset with me." Sometimes people are afraid to say that, right? You can say something like, "I wanna share something, but I'm worried about how it will land with you. I wanna talk through it with care," you know? Again, try to think of it that way. Again, the goal isn't perfection. The goal is clarity. You take the emotional weight out of the sentence and you replace it with steady, honest versions that support connection instead of tension, right? This is one of the most powerful skills that you could build. When you change the way that you express a need, you change the way the conversation moves, and you give your partner a clear path to understand you, and you give yourself space to stay grounded rather than overwhelmed, right? Gosh, there's so much, so much. I want to talk about a lot of different things here, but actually, what I want to do is I want to open it up to any specific questions because I know I've been throwing a lot at you guys, and I'm very curious if anybody has any specific questions that they want to ask at the moment. I'm more than happy to answer.
Yeah, I guess I'll go first with this. First of all,
Yeah.
this has been a wealth of information. I think I've been jumping in the Zoom chat here and there. And by the way, I feel bad. We misled everybody. We said that the event was kind, but little did we know that we get special visitors. Your cat is all
I'm
the bowling.
just like on another planet today. I don't know what's happening with them. It's so weird, but anyway.
No, it's great. We love it. But one of the things that I loved is like the concept of sharing notes with your partner and everything like that. And you kind of touched on what I'm going to ask already, but one of the things that we really struggle with as men with ADHD is the concept of communication. Like, what do you mean I'm supposed to communicate that something bothered me? Right.
Mhm.
Or what do you mean I'm supposed to communicate that with something like sex, for example, like Shane had brought up here, like the need for like stimulation and different things and experimenting and everything like that. Like a lot, like there are a lot of us that still have that years and years of like toxic masculinity that kind of tells us that it's not okay to feel that way or communicate those type of things.
Mhm.
I guess how do you take that? How do you challenge that unhealthy mindset that unfortunately so many of us have been programmed to believe?
It's hard because again, we're so conditioned to live a certain way and to behave a certain way. Like there's like these certain expectations. And I think it comes back to I think it's I think we need to normalize first, right? We need to normalize that this is a struggle, right? Communication is not like this skill set that you just magically get out of nowhere, right? Communication, it's something that you got to build, and your brain is not built to hold every single detail. So things like shared notes, like I love it because it's a support tool, and using tools is not a weakness; it's a strategy, right? I sometimes will tell people to reframe. communication as leadership, right? I think that clear communication is not emotional labor. It's leadership, it's a responsibility, it's respect. And if you want to show up as a reliable partner, then you use the tools that will help you follow through with that. You can also break communication into like concrete actions, right? So like sometimes people will tell men, "Oh, just communicate better." And that's vague, right? It feels like judgment. So I think that sometimes as men, we can approach it by just sharing options that people have. Maybe it's like one of my ex, one of the things that was really reassuring for her was to have the read receipts, the read receipts on, like on your when you're texting. It's so small, but it was really, really helpful for the communication, especially on my end, because like if she saw that I read something and didn't reply, like again, that puts more responsibility on me to communicate better. And so I hate to say it was gamified, but like it truly was a helpful thing. So, and then I think the last thing is to, I guess, make it, make the tools that we utilize for communication masculine safe. So like, and by that I mean reframe it, right? So instead of like, it's not about feelings, it's about clarity. It's not about emotion, it's about teamwork. It's not about performing, it's about aligning, like things like that. I know it sounds so,
You can also put the weightlifting emoji next to every single.
yeah,
Uh,
so I think that men in general often engage more when the language removes shame and pressure, if that makes sense.
totally. Cool.
Mhm.
Shane?
Yeah, so you had talked about the part about jealousy, and it really resonated with me. One of the things that really struck me whenever I was, trying to explore and understand more about my own issues with jealousy. Now, when I first started really exploring it, it was like the misogynistic viewpoint of ownership, right? I own this person, they are mine. Nobody else can have them. That was the kind of language that was in my head, but whenever I started really exploring it, I started really understanding that jealousy was more of the insecurity. You raised all the various questions that really, like, strikes to the nerve of what my jealousy was. My fear that I'm not gonna have the time with this person, my fear that I'm going to lose them to somebody else. And I had a friend of mine who really turned it around for me. And it was just like, if you're communicating, if you're being honest, if you're with the person and they are able to reassure you, what does that look like? What can they say to you? If somebody can say something to you to take away a lot of those fears, like you said with the other thing, facing you with facts, that really resonated with me. And that was really along the same lines of what they had told me. So I really appreciated that. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's important to highlight, especially in ethical non-monogamy, because especially from a male perspective, like we have to acknowledge like something real here, right? A lot of men, we were just never taught how to talk about jealousy. I think that we were taught to hide it, to swallow it, to sometimes even turn it into anger.
Actually,
And
I was taught to celebrate it. Like,
yeah,
you
I mean,
know, you should be jealous about this.
yeah,
Oh, it's happening. Why aren't you jealous?
mhm.
Are you insane? Are you some sort of soy boy, or how
Yes.
beta of you for you to let your partner do stuff like,
Yep.
oh my God. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, no, but it's true that like we were so many times we weren't taught to understand it in a healthy way, you know? And I think that for jealousy, the, being able to openly communicate how you're feeling, like jealousy, it becomes a story that your brain kind of like writes in silence. And then the story ends up becoming worse than what the actual truth is. And no matter how you react to it, your brain is writing one story, but the truth is something else. And we sometimes will develop these unhealthy coping mechanisms because of it. And things like communication and honesty are kind of like the antidote to those stories, right? When you're able to just clearly communicate to your partner, I'm feeling insecure right now, or I need clarity, or I'm having an emotional reaction and it doesn't seem like a logical reaction, or I need reassurance. That's a big one for me. Is I often tell my partners, "Hey, listen, I just need reassurance." And like I used to stop myself because I'm like, "Oh man, Kai, you sound so freaking needy." But like from my partner, there's nothing better than like when a partner just randomly will text me and be like, "Hey, love you," or thinking of you. Like little things like that, like that reassurance helps quell any sort of jealousy that I'll get that I might possibly get. Yeah.
Another thing I learned, and I want to kind of get your opinion on this because you
Yeah.
may have a different one on this one. Another thing that ethical non-monogamy taught me is that this concept of what a successful relationship is. And I loved it because, for me growing up, like we always celebrated the grandparents who went 30, 40, 50 years married and everything like that. And I had a girl talk to me one time and she goes, "Look, what I think about is relationships is one where both people walk away happily and like having grown, whether or not that's a one night stand or 30
Yeah.
years down the road." And I'm going to tell you right now, that was one of those moments for me.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
It's funny you say that because I had a very, very similar conversation with somebody recently because they had brought up length of time together as a KPI for success in a relationship. Like, as in, they said, "Oh, well, my relationship wasn't successful because we didn't last as long as my parents did." Like little things like that. And we got to thinking, like, I was like, well, I don't think time together is a KPI for that because I think that you can learn a lot from a relationship, whether it's for 1 minute or for 100 years. But the conversation turned into, okay, what does a successful relationship actually look like? And to me, at least, a successful relationship is any relationship where the people involved feel respected, heard, valued, and supported, right? A relationship where you can show up without fear, where communication is honest, even when it's uncomfortable. And whether it's a traditional relationship or a non-monogamous one, like it doesn't matter. Obviously, depending on who you ask, you might ask somebody, they're like, well, since a traditional relationship, one partner, shared commitment, but that kind of thing. But I think it's all the same. I think that all the people involved need to feel understood and cared for. And whether it's traditional or non-traditional, whether it's exclusive, not exclusive, I think that structure doesn't make it strong. I think that the people do. And people are the ones who are communicating with each other.
I love it. Love it. Christian, did you have something?
Yeah, I was thinking like, don't bring your relationship to work. Bring work to your
Mhm,
relationship.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Yes,
Oh,
yes. I love that. Mhm.
so my question, okay, so I guess preamble, I have an anchor. I have a nesting anchor partner. We were dating within a church structure a decade ago, then broke up and then got back together and was like, must be non-monogamous. So it's allowed us to have a lot more vocabulary for how we experience our feelings. So I guess I had two thoughts. One was kind of like, how do you navigate? You had talked about time earlier, right? And we know ADHD, like that's our thing. When you're with, how do you navigate time how do you navigate time with like others and time for oneself? Because I feel like I could often get lost. I'm easily lost into somebody else, but I think what's cool about non-monogamy is that I'm like super conscious, but then I lose me in it. So I wonder if you had strategies around that. And I also had another question around, I loved, what does it look like to leave and return? I'm interested in more techniques to help regulate as you're navigating through conflict. So if
Yeah.
that makes sense, because in the moment, I can hold this forever or I can forget it, but I want to like engage with the feeling process metabolism. So curious around those two things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And I think that a lot of people do struggle with that. Again, no matter what the relationship is, like when you're dedicating time with a partner and then dedicating time to yourself to, what do you call it, process and all of that. So I kind of separate it into, I guess, 3 different categories, right? So you have shared time, right? That's the intentional connection. So that's the hanging out, that's the talking, that's the, watching something together, going on a date, that kind of stuff. And then you have my favorite thing, which is parallel time, right? And I try to work that in as well, where you're in the same space, but you're focused on different things. Like there's nothing better for me than, because especially as an introvert, there's nothing better for me than parallel time. Because I always say to my partner, your presence is my present. If you're just there, like I'm good. Like we don't have to talk. We don't have to, like, you do your thing, I'll do mine. Right. I love that. So I love the parallel time. And then obviously the solo time where I want to reset and recharge and take a moment to kind of like breathe and return to me. And I think that especially as men with ADHD, we need this a lot because our brains run hot, right? So I think sometimes if we skip that solo time, I don't know if it's like this for you, but for me, if I skip solo time, I'm snappier, I shut down quicker, I am quicker to withdraw emotionally, right? I think with relationships, a lot of times people will only talk about the shared time. And that in turn, I think creates this guilt and resentment because nobody can live in shared time nonstop. So what I try to do is try to just communicate that to my partner up front, right? So I could tell my partner, hey, listen, I need 30 minutes to just like reset, right? Or if I tell them, hey, I communicate what I need. Like if I want parallel time, like I'll communicate that and I'll just be like, that way, that at least that way they know that I care. They know that I'm present. I just need a little room, And I guess when you are able to actually name it and communicate it with them, it takes the guesswork out of the relationship. Cause I think sometimes the struggle will come from the guessing. Right? When your partner is not sure why you want to be alone tonight or not sure, like, when are we get to spend time together again? Like when there's that uncertainty, I think that's where the issues arise. So I think that the key is to just communicate your bandwidth and to protect and I talk about a lot of this as an introvert content creator, protect your solo time without guilt. Protect your solo. Like I can't repeat that enough. There's a book that I have in my library here. It's a book called The Boundary Revolution. And it's written by my friend Judy who's a boundary coach. And the subtitle of the book says, Decolonize Your Relationships and Discover a New Path to Joy. And one of the things that she says in here, because she talks about like having a fulfilling relationship and still reclaiming your inner peace. And one of the things that she says that she reiterates is that setting boundaries with your partner is not pushing them away. It's just protecting your space. That's all it is. If you want to show up as the best version of yourself, you have to protect your space. Yeah. I think that answers one of your questions. What was the other question?
No, it helps. And I think it might lead into each other. So like recognizing when you might need that, right? So like, how do you regulate through conflict? So when those things come up, something's going on, we don't agree on the same thing. It's like, why is it like this? And why is it like that? Like, because we run out, like, can you give me more kind of like regulation, like strategies, tactics? Like, what do you use to like in the moment?
Like, like you're saying when there's a misunderstanding with your partner in the moment about like what you need.
Yeah, it could be about what I need or just any conflict in general, but like, so I don't overreact. I think sometimes when RSD is going to flicker, if it could be anything small, like, can you pick this up? Or even if, did you see that? Did you do that? Right. And now all of a sudden, like, now I'm 14 again. And I don't really have fears. It's probably
Yeah, I think like our ADHD definitely does not wait for the perfect moment. Right. Our brains fire very fast and our emotions fire fast and our reactions are fast. And then suddenly we're just kind of sitting there thinking like, okay, what the hell did I just say? Or what did I just do that I did not need to? Again, which is something that a lot of men with ADHD have to deal with. And I think sometimes like some people will just be like, oh, just push through. And I don't think that's a healthy way. I think it's healthier to slow it down any way that you can, right? Give yourself a moment to catch up, right? Because right now your brain, it's like gun ho, and find a way to apply in the emergency brake a little bit. And so like I was talking earlier about just taking a minute, just to saying things like, hey, I want to answer you, but I need a minute to just think this through. Or like, hey, give me a second to catch up. Or, hey, I really, really care about this. This is really important. I need, for my own sake, I need to just slow down for a second, right? So like, finding a way to push the brakes, even if it's like temporarily, I think is helpful. Another thing I think that you can do is a lot of times we get like this physical reaction to it sometimes too, right? So like when ADHD reactions are strong, and especially in like disagreements, like sometimes for me, my chest will get tight, my face will start to run hot, my heart will start to beat really fast. It feels like my body is like physically wrapping up, you know? So yeah, I would find a way to slow yourself down physically as well. So I would say slow yourself down both physically and mentally.
Thank you so much. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah, of course, of course.
So tell me this new terminology for me, the word slow and the word down. What the heck? I've never heard.
I just discovered it. I'm still trying to figure it out myself, man.
You got another hour and a half for a slow down meeting?
I don't know if I could present that one. I haven't figured that one out.
Kyle, this has been really, really amazing. I loved the wealth of information that you brought and just how relatable you were throughout all this with sharing your own personal experiences to your cats coming in and out. Like, it really felt like a one-on-one hangout with you, and that was really a great value. And of course, this will be available on our podcast and YouTube and whatnot. And I think a really good resource for people who want to learn more, just not just about ethical non-monogamy, but just communication and relationships and whatnot. This has a variety of potential for a variety of different audiences, I personally feel. So as we start to wrap this up, is there any projects that you're working on right now that you'd like to share with our community members? Where can people find you? Yeah.
Yeah, this is going to sound like a joke, but it's very serious. I just launched a new fragrance and it's ADHD themed, and it's called Why Did I Walk Into This Room? And it is on sale now. I'm not even joking. It is a real thing that I partnered up with Sucre Bay, and it's cherry pie with a hint of cinnamon. And so I'll send you the link and you can include it. And that's on sale. And it is the #2 selling fragrance. It's gender neutral. It's the #2 selling fragrance on the market right now. So I'm very happy.
Whoa,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. And mind you, I look forward to checking that out myself.
Yeah.
And for a large portion of our community is always sharing your TikToks and reels and all that type of stuff. We see you all the time. But for the 2% of people that are in the ADHD community that don't know who you are, the Vibe with Kai.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Podcast and whatnot.
Absolutely. You can visit my website, thevibewithkai.com, or I'm at The Vibe with Kai on every social media platform.
Wonderful. Yes. And obviously on everything on our end, we are the Men's ADHD Support Group, mensadhdsupportgroup.org. And we're a nonprofit centered around conversations like this and just helping men feel safe and understanding, providing education, much like today, what everyone just experienced watching this. So if you believe in this mission and want to support, please go to mensadhdsupportgroup.org and please feel free to leave a donation or share it with somebody who may need this. So wonderful. Thanks for this conversation, and I will talk to you soon.
Right on. Thank you.